Welcome to Faeted, a podcast brought to you by Magella and Carly, two romantacy-obsessed readers who believe that great books must include declarations of undying love and deep thrusts of desire. Diving into the spicy, smutty fantasy genre, we are here for both the rattling of stars and headboards, and our podcast starts with the worlds of SJM, but delves into other realms. Did we mention that washboard abs and wands of all kinds are welcome in this inclusive and magically charged space? No topic is off limits, and no one is forced to have only one favourite heroine. Welcome to Fated, where we are unabashedly and wholeheartedly hot and heavy for spicy fantasy fiction. It's time to sit down and smut up. Warning, spoilers ahead. Today we are doing a deep dive into our current series obsession by an Australian author, which is even better. The series is called The Legends of Thezmarr. And of course you haven't heard of it because no one has, which is baffling. It is baffling to Carly and I because it is actually like incredible, and the hot male brooding protagonist / love interest / warrior, he has gone into the top 5, maybe even top 3 of all time for me. And we're going to do a deep dive on each book. So this is book 1 this week, Blood and Steel. And then there's 3 more to come. And then we are going to speak to Helen. She doesn't know it yet, but she needs to come on so that we can ask her all of the questions that we have about certain characters and certain positions and inspiration for scenes, and you know, if she is trained in swordplay, you know, the things that cross our minds. And I'm very excited. I think Carly is more excited because she started this series first, and it was actually her recommendation that made me pick it up. And to be honest, I was a little skeptical. I was like, I'm not into the name Legends.
Did you not trust me? No, because I'm excited because this is probably the first this is probably the first series that I've read before you, because you are always 30 books ahead. And I feel like I'm just like a little puppy dog trying to catch up behind you. Yeah. So great. If you loved it, then I feel like my next recommendation, you'll be less skeptical. So that's really cool to hear. So before we jump into details, we'll just do a little spoiler or big spoiler alert. So do not listen to this episode if you haven't read book 1, which is called Blood and Steel. We have done a spoiler-free episode, which is kind of like an overview of the whole series, episode 44. So you can go back and listen to that one, go and read the series, enjoy it, and come back, listen to this and join in the conversation on our social media or in our book club. But right now as well, this whole series is free on Kindle Unlimited, which I'm kind of amazed by. You can go to Helen's website. She also has a free novella, and there are other series that she's written too, which I will get to eventually. I need to kind of do a few other books on the TBR and then come back. But yeah, I would love to get Helen on. So spoiler alert done. And we need to just check in. What are we reading currently? So do you want me to start while you think about that?
I know what I'm reading. You go first, for sure.
Okay, great. Sometimes I ask Magella and she just looks around like the book's going to materialize beside her. I'm like... So I have started Reckless by Lauren Roberts, which was actually released, I think, the start of July, and it's been sitting on my Kindle. I pre-ordered it in January, so it is sitting there and has been whispering at me. So I've jumped into that, and that's cool, going back into the world of Payton and Kai and Kit and all of those characters. And I know you've recently read it and enjoyed it, and said it was, for you, more enjoyable, I guess, than book 1. So we will see. I'm reading Reckless. I have just finished listening on audiobook to Abby Jimenez's, what's it called? Yours Truly. Really enjoyed that too. Am I reading anything else? Because sometimes I've got 3 on the go. No, I think that's about it. That'll do me for today. What about you? What are you reading?
Into a comfort read, you know. So obviously in the book club, we're working our way through ACOTAR. So I've just done a reread of Frost and Starlight, which is very fast because it's very small. And I'm rereading the Guild Hunter series. I feel like the more I read them, I just find that, I don't know why. It's like Alina is just so cool. She's a very Aelin-esque character. Like, she's got some fire and anger, and she's got like really sarcastic banter and she's also very, very kind. And it's a really epic love story. And each book in the 16-part series so far, which has still not ended because Nalini luckily keeps writing them for me, she appears in all of them, but they're often side characters that have their own book. And I don't know, I think at the moment there's just so many new things creatively happening for me that with the books, I just wasn't ready to start a new one. Like I just was like, I don't know what I want to do. So I've just done the 2 rereads, the Frost and Starlight, and just read 2 of the Guild Hunter in the last couple of days, and now I'm on to the 3rd. It's just, I don't know, it's like going to bed with a friend, but like a really badass friend who like kills vampires and angels and then has incredible hot sex. So basically my life, I would say.
It's the parallels are just uncanny. Very cool. Cool. All right, well, let's get into it. How about I set the scene a little bit, and then we'll dive into like the favorite scenes and characters as we normally do in our reviews. We want our deep dive reviews full of spoilers to feel like you're sitting next to us having a chat. You've just finished the book, we've just finished the book, and we're messaging each other and we're just having some banter. So it's, I think it's always helpful just to kind of set the scene. So this series is obviously Romantacy. Would you call this, I've seen it called new adult and I've seen it called adult. I think it could probably fit into both those categories. It's the first book of 4. So, you're very lucky if you're listening to this because all 4 are out and released. And I think on Goodreads and on Amazon, I saw the average kind of star rating sitting around 4.5 stars, but not so many reviews, like only 8,000 reviews I saw on Amazon today. I think 24,500-ish on Goodreads. So again, it kind of feels like a little secret sleeper series that's just there waiting to be blown up into the stratosphere. We have got our FMC, Althea, they call her Thea, Zoltaire, and the book begins with this sort of narrative of her having only 3 years to live, like her death has been foretold, which was very curious. And in that time, she has this dream to become a warrior legend, and in this realm, they're called a war sword. I've never heard that in any other series. That's a word that was really new to me. What is this war sword thing? And she lives in this world where women are really forbidden completely to wield blades. And so she's had to kind of harbor this passion and this dream in secret and train herself in secret for her whole life. And it's really, there's this sense throughout this whole series that she's racing against the clock and she needs to get there and do the things. And so I remember in the start of the book, it was a bit like, oh gosh, she's so obsessed with becoming a war sword. She's quite focused on just her own needs and what she wants and her dream. And she was sort of not really willing, I guess, to create friendships and alliances and really connect with her sister. And like, why is that? But I guess you can understand that if she's like, I've only got 3 years, I've got to become a war sword. You don't know when you're going to become a war sword because the Great Right can call to you randomly at any time. I'm not being trained. I might not even have the chance as a female. So is this sort of sense of anticipation at the start of the book about time is ticking. So that's kind of how it starts. And we also meet Wilder right at the beginning, right?
Yes. I feel like the book really quickly set the vibe. Like I feel like sometimes there is that thing that happens in romantasy or fantasy where, people are like, oh, you've got to get to 100 pages or this many chapters in before you kind of start to understand the world, you click with the characters. And I don't know if it was just the mood that I was in or if it just was the way that Helen writes it in this kind of way that feels quite visceral. Like I felt like I was in the forest. So the scene was like Thea in the forest, sort of running away after watching the men train and coming across the war swords, but not wanting to be seen. And then Wilder senses her and you can see his silver eyes, but he doesn't sort of dob her in. He doesn't call her out. He just watches her or kind of just like knows that she's there. And I think that it was like an instant, oh, I'm in. I don't know what's happening, but we're in a forest. There's like some kind of feisty female character who I can tell is going to be a troublemaker, but in like the best possible way. And then instantly this man is going to be her man. Like it was just that sense of like, he's on this horse. He's a stallion, on the stallion, because, you know, as you find out later on, that there's this whole ceremonial aspect to how they get these stallions. Like every part of being a war sword comes with this kind of reverence, like the way you get your armor and the actual sword, you know, the steed is the ultimate in their society to be. It's almost like, in a way, it's above royalty. Like they don't have the same power, but people revere them no matter what, because they are there as the protectors of the realm, and they have to go through such incredible trials to be successful. And many people, you know, they often start with, you know, 100 men or whatever, and then 2 succeed in every kind of year or kind of batch. I was like, the batch of men. That sounds wrong. But anyway, so that's how it sort of began. And I feel like it was really interesting, because often you don't necessarily meet. And I don't know if it was obvious to everyone else, but I just felt like the way he was described, like I instantly was like, that's going to be her man. This is the love interest.
Yeah.
Straight up. I've met him on page 2 or whatever, or 3, and he sounds hot. Like I'm here for him already. Like on this stallion, silver eyes, doesn't betray her, immense sense of power.
Ignoring the dead monster's head or heart or whatever it was that was like he was bringing back from wherever he had been. We're just going to just ignore that and see how hot he is and hear how hot he is. And we start with that prophecy. We have to talk about the prophecy because that was cool. I really like in my fantasy novels when there's a spell or a prophecy or a riddle or something where you're like, oh, what does that mean? And so the prophecy and the realm we're in, it's actually called the mid realms, and you've got different areas of that, like Narva and Tavir and Delmira, which is where they are set at the start. But the prophecy is, in the shadow of a fallen kingdom, in the eye of the storm, a daughter of darkness will wield a blade in one hand and rule death with the other. When the skies are blackened in the end of days, the veil will fall, the tide will turn when her blade is drawn. A dawn of fire and blood. I love it. It's like an adventure that you're about to go on. You like see that straight up. You're like, right, what's the fallen kingdom about? What's the blade? Who is the daughter of darkness? How will the skies blacken? What's the veil? We haven't heard or learned anything about that in the first little bit, and then you're just like, I want to gobble up all of those details and figure out what's going on with that prophecy. So, and that goes through all of the different books in the series as the story unravels and you start to see who actually is the daughter of darkness.
It's a linchpin.
It is,
really,
yeah.
It's a linchpin that holds everything together.
Absolutely. And it really sets the scene for the fact that in the mid-realms, women used to actually fight. They used to fight against evil, and they used to be part of the protection of the kingdom. And then so you think, okay, why now can't females wield blades? It's because in the prophecy they think that, it'll be a female that will be the downfall of the kingdom. So it's a little bit puzzling, that prophecy, but obviously it all ties up in the end and we figure out who's who in the zoo.
The prophecy feels like a quest. Like it's the same kind of thing of like, there's something so intriguing to humans where it's like you have to, follow a trail, understand clues on top of, I guess, fighting against a unified, as in like fighting against something, railing against something that isn't right. Like the fact that there's this thing where women can't become warriors, and we find out how much of the history is steeped in warrior women. And so like instantly our main character Thea is like, she is a warrior. She isn't yet, but she has the spirit of a warrior, the grit of a warrior. And the fact that she can't easily get to her kind of dream is like, kind of gives you that sort of like good frustration. Like you're like, this is going to go somewhere, and she is going to break down the system or something, or she's at least going to like smack down some really annoying like heads of something, because there's got to be something shaken up, or she'll dismantle the system and rebuild it. So I think there's also something that's really appealing about that righteous anger, like the railing against an inbuilt system that isn't necessarily even evil. That's why it's like, it's not so obvious. It's not like, oh, that is an evil system. It's just they decided that to protect people because that's how they interpreted the prophecy. There's a daughter of darkness. So obviously we cannot let women learn how to use a blade, because one of these women will become a daughter of darkness. So I mean, it's a very blanket approach to,
yeah.
but it was interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting as a reader when you're also able to relate to that paradigm, because obviously in the real world, women are still kept out of certain circles and still have to fight harder to be accepted in certain ways. And sometimes there's really ridiculous reasons why females can't do certain things. And so, yeah, it was that interesting parallel as a reader, because you're like, I want you to dismantle the system and I want you to fight and I want you to get there and I want you to show all of these men that don't believe in you that you can do it. And so we have characters in the book that don't want her to be obviously trained as a war sword or to be able to go and become a war sword. They don't want her even in the sparring ring. They make life really, really hard for her once she starts to step into that space. And yeah, so I think there's a lot of parallels with the real world and women's place in it as well.
Yeah, and the whole training academy vibes, which I think, is always a good read.
Always.
We experience that, in the Fourth Wing type of thing. I haven't read Zodiac Academy, but that is a massive theme in that. I mean, even Harry Potter, it's that they're in classrooms, they're, learning things, they're making their way through levels, so you've got kind of that. It's a very layered story that ticks a lot of those kind of aspects of fantasy and romantasy that are very satisfying to read. You've got a prophecy. What does it mean? What are these clues? You've kind of got, a system that she's got to fight against. You've got the training academy, so you get to see her better herself constantly. And, and then obviously you've got this sort of overarching danger to everyone that we're not quite sure what it is or who's behind it. And so there's this kind of, ominous approaching something.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, everyone should be trained. And
yeah,
why are they not letting her blah, blah, blah. And also, tell me more about this Wilder character, because he is very hot and, he could save us, but, let's get them together first, before he goes off, in case he's the first love interest, like in case he's a Tamlin, which I'm always worried about now. I'm always worried when I meet the guy too soon. I'm like, oh God, is he going to not make it? Like, is he going to be like, they're going to like double bluff me? And I'll be like, oh, it's not him. It's not him.
Tamlin PTSD.
Yeah. I think that's a real thing in like society, in the Romantacy society. People are really, it's the Tamlin effect. Everyone's like, oh God, I really like this guy. And he's appeared in the first chapter. It's never gonna last. He's gonna die. He's gonna be a baddie.
Yeah. And I think you've got all the tropes here. So if you like Magella and I, who are like, we don't mind one bed and we don't mind forced proximity, and we really like grumpy men who then turn into these beautiful marshmallow cinnamon rolls with this, real softness inside, but can also then put warrior back on and protect and kill. And, if you like all of that, and again, the prophecy, the quest, the training, if you really enjoy all of that, then I feel like Helen has delivered all of that in this book. But it doesn't, well, to me, it didn't feel too tropey and too forced and exaggerated. It felt like she balanced that really, really well. I also felt like Thea and Wilder were more mature kind of in their characters. Felt like the banter was just a little bit more of a cut above. Helen's traditionally written in young adult, and so this was apparently a bit of a crossover for her into adult fiction and fantasy. And so I think she did it really, really well, because I didn't, how sometimes we say, oh, they're just a bit young and a bit immature, and we're just not quite connecting. I was personally picturing Wilder as much older than we traditionally have as our MMCs. Thea was going to be 27 when she died, wasn't she? She was 24.
24 or
Yeah.
something. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's 24.
Can't remember
Yeah,
if
and
Wilder
so
had an
I
age,
think
but
he's like 30 or something, 35.
yeah, I was picturing him like 35. Like, you know, just crinkly eyes, maybe, you know, a bit more ruggedness, bit of a
Scars,
beard. Yeah.
chest hair. Yeah,
Calloused
I
hands.
totally get it.
Anyway, before I start
Telling
drooling
of
all over
like
the
smoke, cedarwood, and
place,
cinnamon,
smells.
and ice-capped snow peaks or something.
Did he have a smell? He did have a smell. He had a smell. What was his smell?
I think so. I feel like it was like mountain rain or something, wasn't it? I don't have the book. It's on my Kindle.
I feel
I
like it
feel
was
like he had
cedarwood.
like he felt like the rain or a storm. Though,
Oh my
though
God,
I,
how
I
rude.
am reading the Angel Guild series, and he smells like the fresh rain.
Dismounting from
Um,
his great stallion, subtle notes of rosewood and leather, tangled with the scent of rain.
I told you it was rain. I can sense it. And
As he
rosewood
came,
and leather.
oh
Excellent.
my
That
God,
is definitely going to be. Let me write that down. I think I should make
rosewood
that
and
into
leather,
a
that would be a candle with a slight scent of rain. As he came into
what
view, Thea didn't know what detail to take in first. His towering build was a wall of muscle wrapped in black armor, giant twin blades peeking out from behind him. Wet, dark hair was swept up in a knot at the back of his head. I had a little bit of a Cassian vibe there. Neat beard lying
yes,
his
totally.
fierce jaw. The nape of Thea's neck prickled. She knew of him, of course. Oh, Wilder Hawthorne, the youngest war sword of Thezmarr, the last of his kind to have passed the Great Rite. Whoo, 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 yeah. Yeah, baby. I was like, there
I
he
mean, I do
is.
really like the name Wilder. Like, also, Helen's written 37 books. I think there is this incredible moment of magic where there is a bit of divine inspiration, which is what I think is very obvious that happened with Quicksilver. Just a quick segue here. Helen, we love you. We're coming back. But Quicksilver was written by Callie, someone. Sorry, Callie. And she wrote it because she was having like sort of creative issues, or she was struggling with the other series, or there was too many restrictions from her publisher or something. And it just was this idea where she just wanted to write it for herself. And she's like, it just came in really fast, dropped in really fast. And I just couldn't almost keep up with how fast I needed to write it. And I think that there's this thing that happens where people are, they are the channel. They are almost just the conduit between the idea and the audience that it needs to get to. And I think that this series for Helen, though I haven't read other series of hers, I've read all the side books of these, but so I can't say this without having read some of her other books, but I do feel like this feels like quite a channeled, like everything felt like it just intuitively fit together. Like I wasn't like, oh, that's a bit of a weird plot point. Why did you do that? Or, that scene fell flat. Like, I wish that you'd done blah, blah, blah. And I know that you have mentioned in the spoiler free thing that there was some of the spicy scenes you actually like kind of flicked through a bit because you were wanting to know what was happening with the plot, which to me is like baffling. And I listened on bemusedly being like, okay, how odd, but you do you. But I didn't find anything repetitive. And how sometimes, like, I feel like sometimes the notes of familiarity gave me these anchor points of like, oh yeah, I'm back into this energy, or I'm back into like this mindset. Whereas sometimes they can get a bit like, like one of those memes where they're like, what is the thing that Sarah J. Maas says, like watery bowels or something?
Yeah.
Like it's just like there are a few phrases where people are like, she just says them all the time. Like, why? I feel like this series felt very like it just really flowed for me.
Yeah, and look, okay, in my defense, just to share, when I say that I maybe skimmed over a few spicy scenes, I think I probably just read at the same pace that Magella would read because she reads like 900 words a minute.
But remembers it all.
And I guess, like any series, when you get to book 4, it must be really challenging as an author to come up with a different way for a penis to go in the vagina or a different way for someone to orgasm. Like, I think that that's a challenge in most series. Be like, okay, How do we make this different so it feels different? What other word can I use for thrust? Like, so it's nothing against the series, loved it. But I guess by book 3, I was like, okay, yeah, because I was really, really invested in the plot. There are some people, though, I looked up some reviews of it today who were saying that they felt like they wanted even more world building. They felt like it was quite underdeveloped, that they wanted to know more about the monsters and the history and the kingdom and all of that sort of stuff. And it's really interesting how, like, there's that spectrum. You would be like, no, there was plenty. And I'd be like, yeah, I think there was just enough. Like, I think it was great. And then there's people obviously who want more. But I also think, how many books would you have in a series if you kept, like, if you had to go to that level of detail at some point as an author, you've got to go, okay, that's built. That's enough. That's all I can do here. And as we mentioned also in the last episode, like, Helen's doing spin-offs, and there's also the prequel with Telomere Starling and Drew, which is actually the first book that I read of Helen's that got me into this series. So everyone's going to have their own opinion of how much detail, how many spicy scenes. I also someone say that they DNF'd it because it was too spicy, because they don't like reading spice at all. And I'm like, you would not be our friend in the book world. I'm sorry. You could not join. Please don't join our book club. That's okay. There's other book clubs for you.
I mean, and, yes, closed door is great for them. And we are more appreciative of, a more open and exploratory kind of, walk through someone's sex life. So I think that with any book, really, it's so personal, and how much. And I mean, I do feel like the books were sizable. I wouldn't want them to be bigger. I also feel like and this is definitely going to go against what some people think, but I feel like sometimes too much world building makes me feel like Lord of the Rings, where I'm like, oh, it's the 7th page describing the side of the mountain. Like, stop it. Like, we're heading somewhere on a quest. I get it. We're with Frodo. I know what grass looks like. Please carry on quickly. I felt like, and maybe I would feel differently if I read it again now, but I just remember that was my experience of Lord of the Rings, being like, dear Lord, like, how descriptive do I need to have this scene written for me? Like, I have a very vivid imagination. I get it. And also, like, I've now got to take a nap. I'm just going to have a small nap here as we continue on this very long quest through the grass.
Yeah.
Like, I was just like,
yeah. Already. This really kind of hit both of our world building buttons. Like, that was enough, and kept us intrigued, kept us compelled to read more. But yeah, you're right. This book was 550 pages, which is it's good size, a decent size for book 1 in a series. Let's talk about some of our favourite characters apart from Wilder. And who did you love? Who did you hate? Who needed to die?
I like a gang of outsiders. I like the people that you don't expect to be good at things. I like that, they clearly were good, kind, caring people, but then they're also funny, and they're also like, Kip especially is surprisingly outrageous and seems to know everybody, and you don't find out why until much later. And, they're both a bit, you don't think of them as, these swashbuckling, good looking, though I think Cal is described later on. I feel like they do make him out to be quite good looking. But when I first meet them, they sound like the uncool sort of people in the class who are probably, gonna not make it. And if they do make it, it's just, not in a cool position at, like, but Cal's an amazing archer, and Kip has a very strategic brain. So not great with the sword play and the physicality and the, kind of warrior aspects, but is incredibly strategic, which, comes through in the other books as well. But they look after her because, she has to actually bunk in with, that's the rule. She has to bunk in when she actually gets accepted, which is not what anyone wants. They don't want her to be accepted, firstly, into the training and the quest and to become a war sword. But when she does, because she earns her way in there, then she has to bunk in with the other, cadets, I don't know if that's what they're called, but with
All
the,
men.
trainees. And pardon?
All men. Scary.
Yes, all men. And then she has, and because she is kind and because she is um, driven by a sense of integrity and goodness and family, even though she lost her family very young, except for her sister. She has, one of the things that I loved is that she sort of not rescued, but I think she has rescued him from situations, was this older, kind of ex-warrior who we don't find out too much about at the beginning, but who has had some brain damage, it seems, because of a fight that he was in. And so he is not really all there. And he's got this old dog that kind of protects him. But people, they mock him and they pay him out and they're disrespectful. And she reads to him in the library because her voice seems to soothe him and soothe his anxiety. And the dog, they're her two friends. She kind of has this little collection of ragtag friends and people that she'll help that end up coming back in different ways and in surprising ways to support her on her kind of bigger quest. But that dog came in on the first night when someone had some not very good, I needed a better word there, Carly, not very they were wanting to do terrible things to her as a woman. And the dog came in and lay on her bed and did that every night so she could actually go to sleep, because obviously she wouldn't be able to sleep if she had to protect herself, because no one's going to come in the middle of the night and protect her. Her friends tried to help her bathe by herself, or like gave her the secret entrance into a different bathroom and stuff. But it was a whole, gamut of very uncomfortable things that she had to do that she shouldn't have had to do because it was unnecessary. But it was all these things that, to she had to fight against the system, rail against the system. So I loved those two characters. I loved that older warrior and his dog.
Malik.
And I really liked that. I really liked the grumpy woman healer botanist lady. Like, I just was like, she was like, she was like McGonagall in Harry Potter. She's like grumpy and brusque, and you just knew that she was going to come through. I was just like, well, she's gonna, there's more happening under here, but she's not just a grumpy old lady teaching herbs or whatever. So they were kind of the characters that stood out.
Yeah, so that was Audra.
Yes.
And you knew that Audra knew more than she was letting on, and you knew that, okay, there's a reason why she's so hard on not only Thea but also Thea's sister Ren. And you're like, yeah, what's going to become of that? Like, is she really molding them into what they need to be? Yeah, book one really didn't give us a lot, but definitely raised those questions. I also really, really loved Kip and Cal, and I also loved that we had this really sort of hard shell around Thea in this book, pretty much the entirety of this book. And it was Wilder that said to her, you're going to need friends. So previously she's been able to survive on her own, doing her thing in the castle and staying hidden and training by herself. And she's needed to, because she obviously doesn't want to get too close to people because she knows she's going to die in a few years' time. So what's the point of falling in love and building friendships and just for people to lose her? So she's got this hard exterior, but he's like, you're going to need people to get through this. You can't do this on your own. And so I love that we see this softness with them, and then we also see this real softness with Malik and the dog and reading to him. And I feel like that was a safe space for her to do that because he didn't talk. So there was a bit of protection. Yeah. So love that. Let's talk a little bit about Ren, so her sister. So Thea and Ren were left at the castle gates, or the kingdom, not the kingdom. Was it a castle? Castle gates. when they were tiny and taken in. And so there's all these question marks about where they've come from and their family and all of that. But it gives that sense of, well, they should be really close and really tight. However, throughout this story, there is a lot of conflict there because Thea is so focused on becoming a war sword, and Ren's over here being a healer and an alchemist and using medicine and using her mind a lot more than her body. And she sees that that's just as important and valuable to the kingdom and saving the kingdom as becoming a war sword. So you've got that sister conflict going on. Yeah, that was an interesting dynamic because you kind of think, well, maybe they should be really close, but that worked well. That was intriguing. And I know, like, I just love learning about the potions and the different things. Remember the scene in the hallway with Seb, who's the bully and arsehole that wants to kill Thea, really. He doesn't want her to become or to even have a chance at going for the Great Rite. But remember the scene, I've got the quote highlighted, where he was trying to attack Thea and Ren came along with a potion and she threw it at them. Do you remember this scene? I'm trying to get it up just a sec.
Yes. It was purple or something, or lilac coloured.
Yeah, and they threw this powder and then she goes, I suggest you get yourselves to the infirmary. I'd hate for that to get anywhere delicate. You wouldn't want your dick to fall off. You seem to enjoy swinging it around. I was like, yes, girlfriend. And then he freaked out because what man's not precious about his appendage? And, well, that just sorted it out. Yes. And again, it was that example of, well, Thea, you don't always need a blade. You don't need to, always use your body and attack, use your fists. Sometimes we've got some cool magic potions that we can use. So I like that scene. That was funny. Yeah, we get introduced in book one to lots of different characters.
And Seb was a great baddie.
Yeah, Seb was a great baddie. Everything you want in a baddie.
He was very remarkable. Yeah, exactly. Like there was no redeemingness either, which sometimes I'm like, why do you have to make something about them where I feel like, I feel like this is why he's like that. It just, he didn't really have anything redeeming where I felt like, oh, this is very obvious he has a traumatic childhood, or, he was bullied, or, he watched his mother die in front of him or something. It was just like, you are just a dick. Like you are very like small-minded, egoic, just don't respect women. And I'm sure he probably did have a traumatic childhood or, something, didn't get enough love growing up, or, his mother was a narcissist or something, who knows. But she was probably bitter and resentful because she couldn't follow her true calling of being a warrior. So she probably passed that down the lineage of being like, well, and now I've given birth to a man who can be a warrior, and he probably grew up with like just years of resentment from her instead of the love that all children need. And that's what turned him into a terrible person where no one wanted him to make it through, because he was just cruel and unnecessarily so, where I'm just like, why? Like, why? But
there from Magella, good psychoanalysis, good projection of what possibly happened.
Don't you think that's what could have happened? No,
absolutely.
That definitely feels like, plausible.
Absolutely. But in the book, we just love to hate him because he was an absolute dick. He hated women.
There's no backstory.
Don't care. We just wanted him gone.
That's right.
Yes, some good baddies. Lots of different secondary characters, very diverse range. I did like with like Kip and Cal as well, just that they had different strengths, being the strategist, being the flaming arrow, being the incredible archer. They use different. That was all really interesting. I often think I'd like to ask the author, did they study that weaponry to gain some information? Did they talk to an archer? Have they gone and wielded some blades? Do they talk to a battle strategist to get information? Like, how accurate is it? I don't know. As a reader, I don't know. She could have made all of that up, and that has nothing to do with any of those talents and gifts. I don't really care. But it's just, interesting to go, if I was writing a story and they were wielding blades, would I go and like want to know how heavy the blade feels in the hand and how you hold it and how it spins in the air? Like, what level do you go to as an author?
I guess it depends on how long the book's going to be, and how much backstory you really feel like you need to include. And if you have to sacrifice a sex scene to add more in about swordplay, but not the good swordplay, but the actual swordplay, So I think that she struck a really good balance. She definitely did some research, because I think that, we don't grow up knowing swordplay and battle strategy, and, especially because it seems to be not set in an Australian type of climate either. It sounded, to me, I pictured somewhere like Scotland, like moors and like, forests and like rough hewn stone hedges and that kind of stuff. I just think, as an Australian, we don't have much of that here, so I think that there probably would have been research, but we'll ask Helen when she comes on the podcast. I feel like that was a great rollicking read. I powered through it. Yeah. Enjoyed it immensely. There was plot twists, but mostly it was focused on the training, which I really enjoyed. Like Thea sort of finding her way as a potential war sword, or to get a chance to partake in the trial.
Yeah. Any scenes that stick out in your mind? Mine is definitely when Wilder found her bleeding out in the closet / whatever that room was, broom area. I don't know. The cupboard, after she'd been attacked, and how he cared for her. I mean, Melt, that was a great scene. His calloused hand lifted her chin and took her shirt off, and I think he sewed her up, and it was like, who did this to you? And just, so cool, because we see throughout this book and the next as well that he really resists this attraction to her and does not think he's good for her at all. And really, tries to distance himself. Of course, we know the inevitable is going to happen. However, I think that tension was really well played out, and it didn't feel trite. It felt like a mature kind of, I know I'm not actually good for you and I'm not right for you, because he didn't have any clue about the whole fate stone and her imminent death and all of that sort of stuff too. So I really felt like that was drawn out really well. Have you got any scenes that kind of jump out at you? Any quotes?
I mean, I feel like, did we do a few quotes in the last when we did because I feel like there was,
we did a couple, but a lot of them was going to be spoilers, so we kind of held back.
Right. Yes. I mean, I feel like just there was so many lines that just felt effortless, where it was just like the banter was really, kind of felt really natural but quippy and not necessarily expected. And I mean, I do think there was like a beautiful kind of teasing seduction, between the two of them, because she is kind of quite impulsive and spontaneous, because she has this like, well, I'm going to die anyway. So there's this kind of, she does hold back in a way, like, oh, what's the point of doing this or building this thing, a relationship, a friendship, a future. And then I think at the same time, there's a bit of like, well, fuck about and see, fuck it and find out. What is that quote?
Look around and find out.
Like just like, like let's just do it. So I feel like there's like a real impulsivity as well between her and Wilder, which I really enjoyed, because it was quite like carnal in a way. Like she wasn't, like, I feel like she never really felt ashamed of how drawn to him she was, and I love that he had a cabin in the woods that felt very like, yes, that's perfect. And this kind of like privacy, he liked to be alone. And then obviously I can't remember if it was in the first book where she got her mentor. Was that in the first book? I can't remember. So
I'm sticking through.
It's not.
So remember, he had to ride with her to go visit one of the kings. Was that the first book? Just a second. And he didn't talk to her for like 4
yeah. Because then that's where she protected the king, and she like stopped him from being poisoned. Remember, she threw the knife or something, and
that was book 1.
She could smell it. I think so, because they went there and he was so grumpy, and she had to lie on the hard ground, and she was really sore because she hadn't traveled that far by, and she asked him to teach her how to hunt, because he went off and found like 3 rabbits and that kind of stuff, and she had to tend to the horses. And
Yeah. And
I mean, it
they
was
play.
also like, it also felt a bit medieval, like that's, I feel like it was very like, it felt rustic. There was obviously there's no modern technology, but it's like their horses, they're hunting their food, they're drinking out of goblets at the palace. Like it's just, it felt very like, that real castle era that happens. A Beauty and the Beast type.
Yeah.
That's how I picture the castles, like, and women wearing their finery with their gowns and like, and she's like, kind of orphan Annie, and then they put her in a gown, and everyone's like, gasp! Oh my gosh, she's so beautiful. And she's like, yes, and I will still stab you with my knife. Like it's very, she's got a knife strapped to a holster underneath this gown.
Yeah. I'm flicking through as we're chatting. I'm like, oh, that was so good. This feels to me like this could become a comfort read series for me. I'm like rereading this, going, oh yeah, and that bit, like they make camp, and he hasn't talked to her all day, and he goes and hunts, but then she goes and bathes in the river and senses his eyes on her. Like it's all the good stuff that we love. But he's and she, she also hates him for most of this book, but we can tell that her loins are also fluttering. And he calls her trouble a lot.
Yes.
It's the book. They have sex against a tree.
Yeah, with the arrow, remember? I feel like, and she holds the arrow behind her, and it's like, because it's as well, it also felt like it was not at all a romantic first time. It was a real, like, almost like a domination of wills kind of thing, where she was just like, I'm letting this happen, and he's like, you're letting it happen because I am seducing you so hard. Like it's just like, you don't even have a chance to say no, because you're going to want it so badly. Not in a dominating, in any kind of like imbalanced way, but it's a very like primal type of coupling, which I feel like is surprising. I feel like for the first time, like it's often they might move into that as they work through like some of their frustration or anger or something, but to do it as the first time isn't as common, I think, in Romantacy.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. It kind of threw you off a little bit, like, they're doing it. And you're right, their attraction is so carnal. I think that's why Wilder went straight up to the top of our book husband list, because it was just this real primal carnal kind of attraction. And for me, he feels older, and it was just like, okay, this feels a lot sexier than, say, a Xaden, or I mean, I feel like Rowan Whitethorn is quite older, like a bit older too. But yeah, like a Xaden, like a younger MMC. Anyway, it's good. Like some of her sentences are amazing. Like there's really profound, wise stuff throughout this. I'm reading some of the things that Wilder says to Thea, things that Wren says to Thea. They're really quite profound. That if you can take advice from a romantasy, take it from this one. Some of them are really, really applicable for our modern day real world that we are having to live in. But let me get my quotes up, because there's some really cool stuff. I think the main quote that kind of goes out with this series is the one, oh gosh, I had it up here. 1 second. This is probably, how every book has a quote. Wilder says, a true man won't cut you down as you fight your battles, nor will he fight them for you. A true man will help sharpen your sword, guard your back, and fight at your side in the face of whatever darkness comes. Yes, that's the kind of man we want, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, totally.
There's another one. I don't know.
Totally.
And then when they kiss for the first time,
go.
It robbed her of breath and told her that every kiss she'd ever experienced before had been a lie, a shadow of what it was meant to be. She could only imagine what that said about everything else that he would do to her. I mean, drool. True.
True.
But there's one about like blood and steel and a woman wielding that, and it's sexy. And I need to find that quote because it's like the best quote ever. Here it is. You ready? You're beautiful as you are, and I'd wager even more so with steel in your hand and the blood of your enemies splattered across your face.
I mean, it sort of sums up because they're both warriors. Like that
Yeah.
is what they are. So I think that it's a real affirmation of her deeper self that he is like the bloodthirsty warrior. That part of you is the most beautiful to me. Like that's not the part that I will struggle with or that you have to hide or that I will find myself in competition with, but that's the part that is your truest expression, and that is glorious, you know.
So good. Yeah, absolutely. They, over the journey of the whole series, you see how equal they become or are or uncover it. You know, that's what they uncover, is how equal they are and how well matched they are. Yeah, so great. And then how does it end? I'm trying to look up. We end this one with them
Isn't
not.
it a cliffhanger?
Well, it's not. They're not liking each other at all at the end. So let me just get that up. He left. He leaves. So this one ends with him leaving and disappear.
Yeah, isn't that the whole thing? We were like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Can we trust you? What are you
Wasn't
doing?
it really shocking?
So the end, sorry. Okay. So the end also is about her realizing she has magic. So we realize that she has, well, Wilder actually sees this in her first when they rescue Kip and Callahan from the caves. And there's a storm that rolls in, and Wilder witnesses Thea almost like wielding this storm. And so we realize like she's got magic. Yeah. And then Ren, her sister, the alchemist, is like, I've been suppressing your magic for years by putting this magical powder on your fate stone, which holds your magic down because you are an absolute force and you need to learn how to use it. And then, so that's a real fracture in their sisterly relationship and trust, because Thea was pretty upset about that. She's like, why did you lie? Why did you lie about that? Why didn't you tell me? Why have you been suppressing it? All of that sort of stuff. And Ren said, I felt my magic when I was much younger. I have the same magic as you. I suspect you managed to keep yours at bay with all of your physical activity. You were always running around somewhere. I was more sedentary. I think it meant it settled in me sooner. This, like, Thea really was like, that's impossible. I don't have magic. This is not right. And Ren's like, tell that to the lightning coursing through your veins.
A lightning wielder. I mean, it's the best thing you can be in 4th grade. So she's just like gone straight to the.
Everyone wants to be a lightning wielder. It's like the coolest gift, signet, power that you can have. It seems to be a bit of a trend at the moment, a bit of lightning wielding.
That's right. But I feel like, I mean, Helen, this is the 4th book. How long ago did this one get published? Like, when did this one come out? Her first one.
Book 1 was published in February 2023.
Oh, right. Okay, so yeah. So it's new. It's very new. I mean, it's a great book. How would we sum it up? 5 stars.
5 stars. Everything's 5 stars. I think I gave this one 4.5.
Not
everything. I think I did. I gave this one 4.5 on Fable. So on the Fable app, because I just, gobbled it up, loved it. As you say, rollicking good read, had everything: anticipation, mystery, spice, found family, against all odds, women empowerment. Like, it just really ticked all boxes. A bit of a slightly more mature MMC, and I liked the magic system. I liked the prophecy. Like, I really couldn't fault it. Loved it. Hence why I just, picked up the next one and on we went. Really,
yeah.
And why I recommend it to everyone who's like, I want a different, people say, I've read all the things, I've read ACOTAR, I've read Fourth Wing, I've read all the book talk hype stuff. What else can I read? I'm like, why have you not read this? If you really loved Spark of the Everflame, if you really loved ACOTAR and all of the hypey ones, which, they should be hyped, they're incredible books. This should be there. This should be there on the shelf beside all of those. Yeah. And it left us on a cliffhanger, which I love in book 1.
Yes.
When the next
as long as the book is written.
That's right.
5 cliffhangers, as long as the book written.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, they're all written, so it's fine. Like it's just something that I feel like every time I start a book, I'm like, just check that it's a finished series. And then even if it's not, I'm like, oh, too late. I'm already 3 chapters in. It's got to keep going now. It's too late.
Yeah. So highly recommend. Again, pick up the next one. Obviously, if you listen to this, you've read it. So that's great. Pick up the next one. The next one is Vows and Ruin. And that is, again, a nice, fun journey where we figure out more about Thea and her magic and who she really is and their relationship. There's ups and downs. Let's just say that. There's ups and downs coming your way with Wilder and Thea. It's just not, we've still got 3 more books. Yeah. Cool. All right. Great. Fun. Good to do a review. You haven't done one for a while.
Good wrap up.
Good wrap up. And we'll talk to you in the next episode.
That's right. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.